Frankenstein's monster has been stitched, reimagined, and resurrected across more genres than almost any creature in film history. From Universal's tragic Gothic horror to Hammer's trademark sleaze, to Italian melodrama and kaiju sized heartbreak. The creature refuses to stay dead. What's fascinating is how each adaptation mutates Mary Shelley's story to reflect its era and the fears, the fantasies, and the failures that come with it. Today, we are taking a lightning charged tour through some of the weirdest and wildest takes on Frankenstein across the decades. Movies that more so take the Frankenstein iconography instead of directly adapting Mary Godwin's story, so grab your lab coat, dust off your electrodes, and let's see how far we can stretch Mary Shelley's story. We're going to start with Japan's take on the monster. It is pure Showa era charm, tragic, bizarre, and kaiju sized. In the dying days of World War II, Frankenstein's immortal heart winds up in Japan, where it regenerates into a giant, childlike creature. Scientists study him with compassion until the inevitable monster on monster mayhem begins. Enter Baragon, popping in halfway through for an oddly paced but pretty spectacular finale. It's more adventure than horror, but still finds a melancholy tone beneath the rubble. A mix of King Kong's sympathy, Hammer Horror's body grotesquerie? Yeah, let's go with grotesquerie, and classic Toho spectacle. This movie is imperfect but really heartfelt. Even if the story lurches like its creation, the soul underneath still beats strong. And it gave us War of the Gargantuas, one of the best monster films of the Showa era. Nestle that right up really into a respectable A tier. In 1971, we would get a low budget Italian horror take. And it is, I think, beautifully melodramatic. Lady Frankenstein swaps Victor for his daughter Tanya, a seductive scientist who inherits her father's lab as well as his hubris. What follows is half gothic tragedy, half exploitation as she tries to perfect her father's experiments while fending off lustful assistants and her father's vengeful creation. The makeup on the monster is laughably bad, even for the era, but the performance and tone are so committed I couldn't help but enjoy it. It's cheap, sleazy, and wildly uneven, but also strangely empowering, giving its female lead both agency and ambition, even if the movie can't quite decide what to do with either. It's the pulpiest kind of Frankenstein, lurid, loud, and just a little bit brilliant. Going into B tier for me. Released 8 years before its title year, 1972's Frankenstein 80 is Italian horror trying to modernize Shelley's myth, with mixed results. It plays like a giallo where we already know the killer, a patchwork monster stalking the city, desperate for new organs to survive. That idea, a creature killing to keep itself alive, should be tragic, but the film never commits to that theme. Instead, it leans hard into screaming woman zoom ins and more sleaze. Still, there's something oddly fascinating about its attempt to graft old Gothic storytelling onto 1970s paranoia. The monster's tragedy is buried under cheap thrills, but it's there if you squint. For diehard Italian horror fans, it's worth robbing this from the grave, just not quite shocking enough to live again, if you know what I mean. It's going into C tier. Just 2 years later, in 1974, Mel Brooks would bring us Young Frankenstein, as both a parody and a love letter, a pitch perfect tribute to Universal's golden age of monsters. Brooks even used the original James Whale lab equipment, which grounds his chaos in this beautiful authenticity. It's less a spoof of Frankenstein than a spiritual sequel to Son of Frankenstein, with Gene Wilder's manic sincerity carrying the film. What makes it shine isn't the gags, though. It's the respect, the gothic atmosphere, the black and white cinematography, and the impeccable comic timing that make it the definitive monster comedy. Few parodies can be both hilarious and heartfelt, but Young Frankenstein pulls it off with style. Putting on the Ritz will forever live rent free in cinema history now, and this remains a benchmark for all horror comedies to follow. It goes into S tier on this list. Excuse me as I resist the urge to put
Want a date?
into my next Build-A-Bear. Only Frank Henenlotter could take a concept this sleazy and make it so strangely sincere. Frankenhooker is exactly what the title promises, a horny horror comedy about a grieving scientist reanimating his girlfriend from the parts of exploded sex workers. And yet, it works. The film walks a razor's edge between exploitation and empathy, making it clear that the women are victims of men's cruelty, not punchlines, except when they're exploding. It's gory, goofy, and surprisingly heartfelt, with a finale that really flips the monster myth on its head. What could have been gross out trash becomes bizarrely progressive gross out trash satire of male ego and female objectification. If the original Frankenstein was about man's hubris before God, this one's about man's hubris before woman, and it's hilarious. It's fun for me as young Frankenstein, S tier, and I will stand by that. Frankenfish swims deep into the swamp of early 2000s creature features and sinks almost as fast. I first caught this on TV back in the day, and it has the same quality after all these years. The Frankenstein connection is basically non existent besides science made monster. The result is a sci fi channel staple. Bad CGI, flat lighting, and characters who might as well be wearing red shirts. Still, there's something charming about its commitment to the bit. When those computer generated fish crawling onto land, it's impossible not to laugh or cheer. It's dumb fun, even if it doesn't remember it's supposed to be Frankenstein inspired. Think Lake Placid on a smaller budget with fewer jokes. By the time the credits roll, you'll forget half of what you saw, but maybe remember the sheer audacity of calling it Frankenfish. Sorry, Frankenfish, you're going into a D tier here. Found footage meets diesel punk horror in 2013's Frankenstein's Army, where Allied soldiers discover a Nazi lab of stitched together biomechanical nightmares. The concept is, in fact, rad as fuck. A descendant of Frankenstein building war machines from corpses, the execution, shaky cam, and all is hit or miss. It often feels like watching someone sprint through a haunted house with a GoPro, with quality so well that it kind of takes you out of the bit. But the creature design is incredible. All rusted metal and grotesque anatomy. There's genuine creativity behind the chaos, and the attention to period detail gives it more polish than expected. It's more fun than scary, more clever than deep, but if you got a soft spot for steampunk horror and Nazi zombies, this one's worth a resurrection. A flawed but fascinating monster movie experiment. This is perfect B movie. What if Frankenstein's monster survived for centuries, learned kung fu, and joined a war between Thebans and gargoyles? 2014's I Frankenstein answers a question nobody asked, but commits really hard to the bit. Aaron Eckhart broods and punches his way through biblical fantasy nonsense, debating whether he has a soul while flipping through fire and CGI gargoyles. Why? Why are there gargoyles in the movie? It's gorgeously overproduced, but soulless, the irony not lost on anyone. The movie's real tragedy is how close it comes to being entertainingly bad, instead landing at forgettable. The cast gives it their all, the script gives them nothing, and the result is Frankenstein by the way of Underworld. If only it had the courage to be dumber, it might have been a cult classic, but as it is, this doesn't go higher than a C, and it's lucky at that. With James McAvoy chewing scenery and Daniel Radcliffe narrating, Victor Frankenstein wants to be Sherlock Holmes meets, well, Frankenstein, and lands somewhere between fanfic and fever dream. It's told from Igor's point of view, which could have been interesting if it didn't strip away the story's moral conflict. McAvoy's manic performance is the best part, unhinged, brilliant, and perfectly theatrical. But the movie can't decide whether it's horror, adventure, or steampunk romance. There's a version of this story that explores creation, obsession, and friendship with nuance. This is not that version. It's stylish, but always felt empty to me, even when I saw it in theaters. Like the creature itself, assembled with care, but no spark of life. C tier, in large part thanks to that polish. Every version of Frankenstein and his creature, from kaiju to comedy to fishy feature, reflects our fear of our own creations, our guilt for what we destroy, and our endless need to play God. 200 years later, the lightning still strikes, and Frankenstein's shadow looms over every story that dares to ask what it means to be alive. Next week, we are mixing things up by just looking at the many documentaries and a few awesome creators here on YouTube that focus on Frankenstein, discussing whether he's tragic, terrifying, or a tender baby. So go be the person that make friends with the monster and have a good day.